Well, there we are.
All right.
Hi. Oh wow, I think we're live. Okay, great. Sorry,
Oh, good.
I'm a little rusty. Yes, it's actually been a while since I've done a webinar. So yeah, it's definitely a pleasure to be back here. I'm very happy to be hosting everyone here. I think I've done a few with Gianluca. He's amazing, like one of the best experts I know in online marketing. Sam, I had the pleasure of doing a webinar with recently outside of Semrush, but it was still, you know, quite good. And it's great that we're doing it now with this much larger audience and platform than we had before. And Arianne, I think it's our first time working together, and it's exciting to see how things go. So I think in our usual fashion, before we kick off, which should be in a few minutes, we'll start just by having some, you know, small talk, let more people join. Everyone out there, feel free to, you know, like drop it, like the chat is open. At any time you have any questions, anything interesting, any ideas, please feel free to ask inside of YouTube, inside of the chat. We will address it when we have time. We're going to start with the presentation by Gianluca on the topic at hand. And of course, then we'll, you know, switch over to the questions. But until we do that, wherever you guys are from, please let me know. It's good to get some feedback so you understand what's going on out there. And also something else that could be especially useful is to understand why you're here. I mean, we know the topic here is to understand what's going on, like how Corona is impacting our campaigns. I mean, this is our livelihood. It's the livelihood of many, many other people out there. And a lot of people are really struggling from this, as everybody knows. So yeah, if you're here, what's the reason? Are you currently struggling because of Corona? Are you nervous about what might happen because of it? Or are you just wanting to try to understand what Gianluca is offering, which is his method for understanding, his method for figuring out the impact of what this epidemic is going to do to your performance for your campaigns and how to address it, of course. So, right, so by the way, before we start, let me think. Gianluca, I know you're from Italy. You're in Italy, right?
Correct.
Good. Sam, I think you're in England, but you don't sound like it.
I'm not in England. I'm
Massachusetts.
Yeah, just outside of Philly. I live in Lancaster.
Oh, Philly.
PA.
Okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
You know, it's close enough to England.
Yes.
Right.
New England. New England.
Oh no, I don't like New England.
But is it Massachusetts? Oh, that's not New England. Sorry, it's Pennsylvania.
No.
I was
Yeah,
thinking.
PA.
Yeah,
No, we're in the middle.
Yeah, you're just south of New England. Yes.
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah. Yeah,
I'm originally from Florida, so for me everything's north. Yeah, and no tea in harbors. Yes, I wonder if salt doesn't help. Arianne, and you're English. We already established that earlier.
I am very English, and I am currently in England, in the north of England. So if anybody knows Leeds, hello from Leeds.
Oh,
that's why you say you have a flat accent earlier. You were saying because people in the north of England don't usually sound like that, right?
Some do. I'm not from around here. I've been up this way for about 10 years. And despite everybody's best attempts, I haven't modified my accent. I do the long vowels. If I was a proper northerner, I would have quite short vowels. So I would say bath and path. But instead I say bath and path. So I get a lot of stick for that still after a decade up this way.
Yes. I just am fascinated by that. Okay, cool. And some people are answering here as well. So we have someone from India. We have Yuri Zamtarkov. I can't say that, so I'm sorry. Although my grandfather was Russian, but he's in Canada, and he's actually here to understand the impact of what Corona might be doing to his campaigns. He wants to understand, like, and I think from that impact, by the way, once you understand it, the next step is to understand what steps you need to take to address that. Yes. Okay, great. Now, I think I will go ahead and do the formal introduction to our wonderful host and guests. First off, I will start with Arianne. Well, she's been in the industry for a while, actually 14 years to be exact. So that's, pretty far. I mean, she's probably seen a lot of things change. Arianne's been working for some of the UK's best-known agencies and beloved brands. She's focused on paid marketing for the most of her career and now owns a small consultancy where she helps agencies and brands both maximize their potential. And also, you're going to see her around. I mean, she's a regular industry speaker, trainer, and award judge, and is the current UK Search Personality of the Year. So I'm very happy to have Arianne here. So I think she's going to, help us out a lot. Like I said earlier, we're gonna start with Gianluca's presentation, which will be followed up by a Q&A session and also a panel discussion. That's where you're going to be hearing more from Arianne and also Sam. Sam, who I've hosted before, he is the VP of Strategy and Analytics at Ruchlewicz, which is a global boutique digital communications agency. Sam's unique approach to marketing is rooted in non-traditional background spanning finance, real estate, plus business, which he uses, I think, very effectively to help clients uncover hidden opportunities, which, by the way, that's one thing you're going to find, I think, in a lot of very good campaign managers, that they have this unique background, because to be good at online marketing, well, to really excel at PPC, it really takes someone who is very well-rounded and has sort of many different skill sets. One of them, finance, is a big one. If you know finance, it's a big plus if you're getting into online marketing. Business is common sense as well. Business is important as well because you have to understand what it is you're selling. So being able to bridge the two does make someone a stronger campaign manager. So in addition to his work at his agency, Sam is an investor in early stage companies, international keynote speaker, published author, and faculty member at Johns Hopkins Carey School of Business. So thank you, Sam, for joining us. I look forward to this. Again, finally, we have Gianluca, and he is the presenter today. He's the founder of BoosterBox. BoosterBox is a performance agency specialized in scientific marketing. Before BoosterBox, Gianluca was working at Google for 6 years on different teams within AdWords, first as a product specialist, and then he went on to manage online marketing for Google products in the EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa region. Gianluca also served as Capital G's advisor, helping startups with their online marketing and Google's own late-stage investment fund. So Gianluca has been around. I mean, he's kind of been working. He was involved in Google way back in the day. I know he was very much involved with the product, and he understands them very well. Left and built his own boutique, which is kind of taking a lot of what he learned and applying it to, serve clients and even more. I mean, he's of all the campaign managers I've met, actually, Gianluca is one of the more technical. So, what he has to say is something that I think we should pay attention to. So I think I will stop. Yes, I'll stop rambling on and let Gianluca take control and begin the presentation. And like I said before, any questions, anytime, hit us up on YouTube and then on the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joel, for the intro. Super pumped to be here with you guys. It's been a while. I'm going to share my screen and jump straight into the topic for today, which is predicting how PPC campaigns are impacted by the COVID-19 situation. By the way, I think by now, unfortunately, for most of the words, probably we need to, it's no more prediction time, right? It's more estimating the sad reality. Today, obviously, we're ignoring how this strategy is affecting personal lives, and we're focusing on the business impact for that. All right, so we're going to discuss 3 things today. How do we assess the impact? I'm going to share with you a couple of scripts to assess the impact and potentially to react to that. And then we're going to discuss a little bit on what Google and Facebook are putting on the table for us advertisers. All right, so Joel already introed me. That's a beautiful picture of me looking as smart as it gets. And you know what BoosterBox is by Joel introduction. But let's talk about COVID impact. All right, so this is based on a report from UBS that was released a few weeks back, right? And I found it particularly interesting because in this report, we sort of predict a recovery by industry, right? So tourism and airline would take a little bit more time to recover. Then automotive, oil and gas are a little bit in between. Consumer product and consumer electronic would respond quicker to the evolution of the outbreak. Now, again, that was a estimation that was done a few weeks back. probably now the picture is a little bit different, and other estimations are suggesting that tourism and airlines actually won't recover by the end of the year, but probably somewhere in 2021. So this is overall to give us an understanding, depending on which clients we're managing, in which industry they are, when sooner or later we should expect things to go back to some sort of normal. I also want to share a view that is taken again from the same UBS report, taken from different banks, BNP Paribas, Morgan Stanley, UBS again. It's more or less consensus on a recovery to happen overall in the economy, sometimes in the future, or end of 2020, or again, H2 2021, depending on the evolution of the outbreak and how the government will respond. So I think spending 2 minutes to discuss, the macroeconomic elements here obviously is crucial. As PPC campaign manager, we're always into the nitty-gritty details of, quality score, ranking, etc. But we are part of a bigger beast, the economy. So it's important to, to know where our clients probably are going, right? Now I can share, obviously. It's obvious to say that I don't have answer to all the question on, how exactly the COVID is going to impact, especially because, we don't know exactly how will things unfold in terms of finding a cure or a vaccination, or, how the outbreaks will play out. But I can share mistakes that I made so far, lessons that I learned so far, and I'm really looking forward for, you guys, your input, for Arianne and Sam, and also the people in the panel. So we saw at Booster Books an increase, this is obviously fairly obvious, an increase in sales for online groceries, right? Food, beverages, alcohol, drinks. We saw an increase from clients playing in the industry. Also, generally speaking, we saw a slowdown for most e-commerce products. In the beginning, here I'm talking specifically about Italy, right? After China and Iran, Italy was the third, I think around the same time, probably together with Iran, the first country outside China to be severely impacted. So unfortunately here, I have the advantage of being first mover. So I hope that me sharing with you today what we have seen and how things played out could potentially be beneficial for all of you guys that are in different parts of the world that haven't been affected, that have a little bit more weeks to predict, right? So let's look at what happened in Italy here in order to predict what we could expect overall also for your clients. What we've seen in Italy is at the beginning of the lockdown and at the beginning, in the first 3-4 weeks of the epidemic raising concerning level, we got a massive decrease in all e-commerce products on fashion, beauty, and travel. Things kind of change after a few weeks on beauty products. So after 3-4 weeks, when people were locked in at home, we actually saw a massive increase in beauty products. Another element, kids sports at home, products related to kids, especially toys, we had fantastic result. Imagine Christmas plus Black Friday combined together, okay? So there are micro niches, obviously, in e-commerce that are benefiting on that. And there are, within the lockdown period, users have different reaction, if this is in the first weeks or in the second part of a lockdown. Now, on lead gen, as of today, I still don't have enough data to tell you, exactly one consistent story. And on B2B, what I can share is that we've seen, for the moment, B2B to remain relatively unimpacted. Or in other words, I should say, B2B, it's a bigger beast. It's a bigger boat. So, both positive and negative changes take a little bit more to happen, right? Because it first impacts the B2C side and then the supplier, so the B2B provider. So we saw also a couple of user behavior changes. One, again, specific for the Italian market. The first, but the assumption here is that the user could potentially behave similarly in other countries. The first changes, we saw a switch back from mobile to desktop across industry. So back in 2011 type of metrics. Right now, but both on B2C and B2B side, we're all used to see mobile being 60-70% at the very least of the overall traffic that we're getting, right? I'm talking about Google Ads here. Obviously on Facebook is even more. We actually saw not probably, an entire flip. So desktop to be 80, that would be too extreme, but definitely desktop came back to the 50%. So that is very interesting because it's obviously changing entirely the picture on CPC. As you know, CPC on desktop tends to be more expensive, right? But on the other hand, CPCs are also decreasing after a few weeks, as a few advertisers are pausing their campaigns. They cannot ship, they cannot deliver, they cannot, people can simply go in the office, so they cannot operate as usual. So several advertisers are decreasing their campaigns. I think many of you, probably if you guys have been playing with Facebook ads, you've been seeing very clearly CPM to decrease there, right? So there are two opposite forces that we've seen on CPCs. On one side, and that was more true in the beginning of the lockdown, CPC went up because people moved back from mobile to desktop. But then, as advertisers switch off campaigns, we saw CPCs going down. Also, conversion rate has been fluctuating heavily. And it is still very difficult to predict, but generally we get cheaper traffic, right? So it changed entirely the combination of CPC and conversion rate. So out of this, I have two operational suggestions that are very obvious, very trivial, but again, these are two things I wish I knew on day one and I implemented on day one. I know some of you out there, most of you unfortunately have been already impacted, so most of you are not in week one, but hopefully you're not in week 16 or 14 like we are here. So number one, definitely enforce the message if your delivery are still guaranteed. Change your extension, don't change your ads. That will potentially require a lot of work and it's not sustainable, but simply change extension stressing the message that delivery is guaranteed. And also obviously add that in the header of your website. The second element that we observed, this is something that we observed in Italy and also, as the outbreak tackle also, spread to other countries, it's something that we also observe elsewhere. There was a strong sense of community, right? Pretty much every country in the evening, people are clapping for the amazing works that the medical professionals are doing, right? People are singing on the balconies, are celebrating moment to find a strong sense of community. So this is a fantastic opportunity for us as marketers to show that our brands are there, are supporting, right? I think all of us can remember stories from 2011 or sorry, from 2000 and from 9/11, where we all remember where we were during moment of crisis, and we all remember a story of a brand or a local shop or a local supplier that was particularly human in those moments, right? So I think this is one of those opportunities where us as marketers, as a PPC specialist, we are campaign manager, but we can also play this sense of understanding what is the broader impact on the economy and what is the broader change in consumer behavior. So again, a strong sense of community is something that could be played in creative, in the message. In many countries, there were hashtags that developed in order to support. I think in the UK, there's a lot of messaging about protecting NHS, the national services. In Italy, there's a message on, everything's going to be fine. So in each country is trying to take, a spin towards building a sense of community together. That's something to use in order to build up a positive marketing message. Now, this is the situation in Italy today. So right now we're at the end of the curve, right? So hopefully, or at least in a very different shape of the curve. In red here, you have the new cases, and then in pink, you have the actual, the current positive cases. So in this part here, things were super fluctuating in terms of conversion rate and CPC. In this part, things start already to get back to normal in terms of conversion rate, and CPC are way cheaper than they were before. So whenever in your country the curve starts to look like that, maybe you can expect something similar. Now, let's try to dig in a little bit more on a quantitative approach. Let's try to give it a little bit more of a scientific spin on how do we assess the impact of COVID-19, right? So far, I told you more anecdotal evidences of what we've seen in Italy, but I want to give you a framework, right, of what we use in order to assess a little bit better. So we are using a tool that is called synthetic control group. in the 70s, if I recall correctly, in the state of sorry, it wasn't in the 70s, it was in the late 70s, early 80s, if I recall correctly. In the state of California, they banned the possibility for people to smoke, in public places. And the assumption behind that was the fact that, they could expect a decrease in cases of cancer. So the problem is, anytime you establish a policy like that, right, how then you cannot go back in time and compare and do an A/B test. You don't have, this scenario where you never publish the policy, you never change the law, right? So it's either you have the law or you don't have the law. So in order to sort of estimate how many cancer cases, how many lives were saved by the introduction of this policy, scientists developed something defined as synthetic control group. Basically, synthetic control group took other states in the US and aggregating them, sort of projected a series of parallel universes where there were different Californias, right? Where different policies were or were not enforced. So using exactly the same approach, this is what we're doing today. We're comparing two words. We're comparing the word where unfortunately we live today, the word where COVID reared its ugly head, versus the word where COVID never happened. So there is a package, which is, by the way, also developed by folks at Google, that you can find in this link. And also, or you can, I published an article on LinkedIn recently with exactly the same script. You can use this package on R in order to run exactly this analysis. I want to share a little bit more details on how that works. Let me give a specific example. Let's say you are operating with an international client active in many European countries. And let's say you want to check if the effect of Italy lockdown had an effect on sales, all right? You can use the causal impact package that was shared by taking and injecting each country sales. So the sales that you got to UK, Germany, Italy, France, and whatever countries you want. And then it will measure the weighted average of those countries to create a counterfactual estimation of, parallel world, perfect twin of Italy. So that is step one. You need to create the parallel world. This obviously works with any country in the planet. At this point, you inject all your data in a spreadsheet following the example that you guys will find, run the script, and you get the output. The output will look like that. So the main time series, or AKA the bold line, will be compared to the predicted behavior. So in this case, you could be able to see that there was a massive difference between the actual time series, the one that is dotted, and the bold line. And so that you can actually measure exactly what is the difference, how many less sales you had in Italy versus a world where COVID never happened. This is something you can replicate for any country and for any metric. This is an approach that doesn't work only for PPC. It works for any sales, right? It could be the entire sales that the website is doing, leads, e-commerce, anything. Because the first step is creating the parallel universe where a certain event never happened. And this is even better, right? Because this is something that you can use for measuring incrementality, for measuring, releasing a certain bidding model, rebranding. This is something that you can use every time you want to test something and you cannot go back in time, and it's not possible to do an A/B test because, an event that is outside your control happened. You can use exactly the same package. So that was element number one, right? Using this package, you will be able to estimate exactly what is the difference in sales from COVID. The second element that I want to share is about leveraging geographical restriction. I'm referring here specifically on e-commerce products or products that are operating offline, right? So I don't know if you are operating advertising globally. Let's say there was a question earlier, a gentleman working in the healthcare industry let's say if there are medical professionals that are on the ground, so obviously there is an offline service, right? In all those cases, scientists are predicting that further lockdown and further spikes in the epidemic might happen in the next months, right? So hopefully now the lockdown that most countries are operating with will reduce the number of infected people, but that doesn't guarantee that further infection, are avoided. So it is actually, unfortunately, likely that other spikes in the infection could happen in specific geographic region. So what it means is that we might find ourselves to operate in a world where we cannot ship in a specific region, right, of the country where we operate. Now, if you have advertised in the US, you know that in the US, the zip code tracking works fairly well. It's fairly granular, and it's a very reliable tool. You can also exclude DMAs if you want to aggregate, but generally speaking, zip code really cut the mustard. In other countries, that's not the case. In the UK, for instance, you can only exclude or target. By the way, you cannot exclude, you can only bid less. But you can only do that on the 2 letters of a zip code, right? So let's say in London, N1 is probably, millions of people are in London N1, right? Because it's a massive part, it's the entire north of the city. So that's just an example to say that some of the elements that are designed in Google Ads actually are not making geographical restriction that easy. So we built a script for that. The script, everything I'm sharing today is open source, it's free. You guys, obviously we need to stick together. So feel free to use it and make it better. So if some shipment services have difficulties delivering the products, in certain areas, you can use the script that is leveraging proximity targeting. So how does it work? The script, first, it identifies the geographical areas to exclude, starting from the predefined list of zip codes. And then at this point would translate the zip code in the geographical areas and go and decrease the bid on those specific areas. So us, as campaign specialists, we just need the zip code that we want to exclude. The script will translate the zip code in the Google language, meaning the geographical areas. Now, if the zip code that you are injecting in the spreadsheet is not present in the location that are defined by Google, here there is a link to the Google list of location that Google is recognizing. Then if the location is there, then the exclusion will be perfect, exactly what you wanted. If the location is not there, then the script will set up a -90% bid adjustment, and that would be, your campaign will still technically run also in the area that where you don't want to appear, but at least you're running there with a very, very low bid. So it's very unlikely that your ad will actually generate a lot of cost. So to give a specific example, this is a specific area of northern Italy around Milan that was particularly affected, and delivery services were just not delivering e-commerce products there, right? So by adding the areas in red, we just included the zip code of those areas. Google recognized that and exclude the specific areas in red. But in certain areas, Google didn't recognize it because Google mapping is not 100% complete. And in that case, and these are the blue dots, we use proximity targeting, and we ask Google to automatically apply a -90% bid adjustment. So we ended up excluding exactly all the areas that we wanted, going beyond the limitation of Google not being able to map all the geographic areas that we needed to exclude. Now, for the implementation, it's fairly easy. There is a spreadsheet. You can make the copy of the spreadsheet. You can add a label in the campaigns where you want to focus. Simply add the label excluded COVID-19. Then you copy and paste the script that you will find in this link on Google Ads and modify the relevant parts. So, in the script, it will be asked to modify for instance, the spreadsheet where you're taking the data from.
But Jean, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think it'd help if I could get a copy of the link, and I'll put it in YouTube right now.
Sure.
That way it's relevant for people.
Sure.
Thanks. I almost rarely interrupt the presentation, but I
No, 100%, of course.
Because I can't click on the YouTube video. Awesome, thank you.
Super. Yeah, the script is here on GitHub. Yeah, there's also a typo. Sorry, guys. All right. So look, I'm so sorry. We wrote the script with the documentation. It's in Italian. We were a little bit in a rush when we published that. Sorry about that. But ignore the documentation. You can use this is exactly the guideline that I just shared. You need to exclude here, to include here the link of the copy of your spreadsheet. Keep the tab name exactly the same. Is going to be inclusion list. And in email, you can add your own email here. If you add the label at campaign level, excluded _ COVID-19, the script would only operate on those campaigns. There is a big limitation of this thing. It only works right now with this table of zip code. So we made it in a rush because we wanted to, to help our clients operating in these areas. So we only designed that with Italian zip codes right now. Again, this is open source. So feel free to take it and adapt it with the countries where you want to run it. So you can re-elaborate the list of zip code in this list. And there's another limitation. Right now, Google only allows to max 500 proximity targeting. So, that's obviously a limitation. If you end up adding, thousands of location, it might be that, a couple of thousand are recognized by Google, but maybe there is another 1,000 that are not recognized. And in that case, you need to use proximity targeting, right? So only 500 of them would actually work. And the biggest limitation, which is what I mentioned earlier, is the fact, and there's no workaround to that, unfortunately. There's not a workaround to a workaround, because in theory, we are already discussing sort of a hack. It's not possible to exclude zip code that are identified through proximity targeting 100%. The max you can get is a minus 90% in bid reduction. So these are the two scripts that I wanted to share today, right? The first one in order to assess the impact. The second one in order to limit your campaigns in case there's another spike in a specific area in the region where you live. You can use this script in order to exclude those areas at scale. I want to spend a couple of minutes to discuss something that maybe some of you have seen already. Google and Facebook are doing steps in order to support businesses. Google pledged for 340 million in ad credit to SMB customer worldwide. So giving credits that must be used by the end of December. Who's eligible for that? We don't know exactly. This is what we know. It's going to be SMBs. So this is just my gut feeling, right? But if you have a Google rep and they're sending you an email and in their signature, they're called LCS, large customer sales, that client is not an SMB. So that's the best guess I can give you if you can qualify for that or not. But you need to be having campaigns that were active in Jan and or Feb 2020. And Google, this is something you can run yourself as an advertiser, or you can manage campaign through a partner, doesn't matter. How does it work? How do you claim this money? Google will automatically apply that in your account. So we don't know exactly how this will play out. I hope these are not $50 for every $50 that you spend, or like get X, spend X, get Y type of things. But in any case, this is a step that Google is doing to help all of us. Another program is what Facebook is running. Facebook is running, it's called the Small Business Grant Program. They pledge $100 million in cash grants and a credit. It's only available in USA at the moment, but they said it is going to be extended worldwide. There are some criteria for eligibility that are a little bit clearer. So the number of employees, being in business for a certain amount of time, over a year, and have experienced two challenges from COVID-19. There's this other one that is a little bit awkward: be in or near a location where Facebook operates. Like where it doesn't, on Mars, it doesn't operate in any case. There are more info if you guys Google this. I don't think this one is going to be automatically applied. So if you have a Facebook rep, reach out, or otherwise Google it and trying to understand a little bit more when this will be extended if you're not in the US. So this, I hope, gave you a little bit more light on how we can estimate a little bit better and react a little bit better to the situation that we're all living. Obviously, I'm aware this is not covering 100% of the question you guys have. So, if you guys have any question, I'm happy to take them.
Okay, hey, great. A bit of an abrupt stop, which means I have to respond faster to unmute. But yes, that was great, and we have a lot of questions. By the way, one thing that I found very interesting, I love the script that you made, and one thing about people who don't know Gianluca and Boosterbox, I mean, they are much more technical than most agencies, and they do develop a lot of their own scripts and programming in order to automate. This is one example. I think it could also work well in the time of natural disaster. Like, for example, if a hurricane hits the southeast, you throw in those zip codes, right?
Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just Corona, it's like anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah.
Like if there's anything that suddenly hits, or in the States, let's say there's some, anyway, I just say the States because they have all the disasters. I mean, they have every type of disaster, right? Okay, great. First of all, do you at all, you're talking about like, let's say like bidding down on certain areas and so on, but do you at all recommend excluding, or they say pausing campaigns? I mean, assuming that you can still stay in business.
Pausing whatsoever, yeah. That's a very difficult question. I don't know the answer. I'll try to tackle this question from two perspectives. On one side, if you pause the campaign for too long, you don't know exactly what's going to happen when you reactivate the campaign. I'm really curious to hear Arianne and Sam's opinion, and Gerald as well, your opinion on this thing, because the way I always operated was after 2 weeks of pausing a campaign, I kind of get a little bit scared. Actually, I don't have any data point to prove my gut feeling, right? But 2 weeks for me is the number I have in my mind. So that would weight me more towards not pausing campaigns. On the other hand, obviously if the businesses right now has cash flow difficulties, unoperational, there are very, very serious challenges, right? So in that case, obviously, quality score after 2 weeks is the last of your concern. But that's probably, I don't have an absolute answer that is applicable to all the situations.
Of course, it depends on everything. Like if you just have no stock, then what could you do? Now let's say COVID ends, right? And we have to get back to normal. What do we do? Switch to manual bidding because we don't have good history maybe, or things are changing?
Well, I like to make the analogy that, automatic bidding is always running. It's like a runner running backwards, right? It's always looking at the historical series and trying to sort of predict the future if there is a wall sometimes. And right now, I mean, the historical series is trash, right? If we look at what happened in the last 4 weeks, they are in no shape or form something that we can use in order to predict the future, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's important to see where you are in the curve on the market and try to see if there's less volatility in the CPC and conversion rate. Also average order value, really. But that's, a little bit, it's not that common that you have very different values in average order value. So I would really focus on conversion rate and CPC. And if these two metrics are stable enough, then you can rely on automated bidding.
Very good answers.
But this is a really big issue, because it's a big issue with automated bidding in life. That's why I honestly don't feel always comfortable running automated bidding. In probably most of our operation, we run with different bidding model where we have a different level of control.
You're speaking more about search there, no? Or you mean display as well? Yeah.
Obviously, if we're talking Facebook, there's no way you can do your own bidding, right? On Facebook, 100% you need to, nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
I think
who knows what's happening.
Crystal ball, see? Always at hand. How much should I bid?
So Arianne and Sam, I mean, you guys are campaign managers. So what kind of impact have you felt?
It's been really interesting because it really depends on the vertical here in the UK. Some people are, thriving during times like this. Other people are pivoting the way their business operates and looking to, offer slightly different services to a new market. So, for example, I have a client who works in the education space, selling solutions to schools. And what they're doing now is actually making a lot of that help and support available to parents who are trying to educate their kids at home under lockdown. And that's not an audience that usually they're set up to serve. It's not their business model. However, we've had a lot of conversations about, what can we do to make the most of this? How can we, capture the data and try and use it in an engaging way to build the brand? And I think for many brands, what we're going to see is a lot of long-term implications and maybe some complete business changes that come out the back of this. But, even within an industry, it's not been one size fits all. Anyone who knows UK brands will have heard of Primark, massive fashion retailer here in the UK, one of the biggest brands. I think they're similar to JCPenney in the US. And, they don't have any e-commerce presence. They've claimed to have not needed it. They say it wouldn't work effectively for them because it's fast fashion, cheap prices. But they haven't.
I don't see them surviving long, honestly.
Oh, exactly. So they've got these massive stores in city centres across the UK. They haven't sold a thing for 6 weeks.
Yeah. Well, it's like, but in general, it's not just because of Corona. Like you have Sears, for example. Didn't they just go out of business? Like the big American retailers are failing now.
Exactly. So some areas of retail are thriving and others are finding it really difficult. And so I think the challenge is, as always, if you can pivot and find a way to make it work, then do. But, as Gianluca pointed out, for many, the cash flow they spend on marketing is going to be the difference between staying in business and not. So for some companies, they really don't have a choice, even if their industry in general might be doing quite well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So Gianluca, you're talking about like a lot of it depends on how stable things are when you're getting out of Corona. Italy, like you were hit very, very hard. But I also think, I'm no Corona expert, but I do think you're getting out of it sooner than other countries. Like I think in the United States, it's gonna take a while before they start, getting out of the crisis. While Italy's already seen the worst of it, and it's also really bad. What has it been like for you? Like, has it been very sudden? Is it stable? Also, I don't know how much Italian market you're serving either.
Italy is a smaller market for us. Italy is only 15% of everything, but it was super interesting. First of all, obviously, 50% of the companies, me included, we are Italian. So, it was kind of impossible not to fit it. I think it's a little bit, what is changing is really in the user behavior. I noticed, and I don't know if these two elements are connected, but to get a little bit more stability in the curve of CPC, I guess less variance in the CPC and conversion rate fluctuation, the moment people kind of understood that this lockdown thing was going in the right direction, you start seeing the light, right? I think a lot has to do with cultural, I don't know why I have goosebumps when I say that. I don't know, I guess, sorry. No, I think it has been very emotional for all of us, right? We did this script in a rush because we were like, shit, how do we help the world? Like the only thing we can do is coding. So we coded the script and asked the communities to donate to this hospital if you use the script, right? So that's why I'm passionate about that thing. But I think the element that I think we can all bring home is trying to find the common denominator in the user behavior is very difficult. So I would focus only on the range of variance in conversion rate at CPC, because that's something where we all, as campaign manager, are a little bit more control. It's very difficult to understand what drove that user behavior. Maybe we're seeing the light, or maybe I'm making this up. I don't know.
Wishful thinking, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, it depends on the industry as well. Right. Are there any industries that you feel are doing better because of Corona? Like leisure games, for example. I imagine the gaming industry might be better now. More people at home.
I think gaming is doing pretty well. I think we've seen fashion, like apparel, athletic fashion, doing pretty well. People trying to work out more, people trying to go for runs, people taking advantage of some of these, working from home opportunities. That's been good.
Because here we weren't allowed to. We weren't allowed to leave 100 meters of our home here.
Yeah, home gyms doing great. Here in the US, Peloton just had a great earnings call. So Go Peloton, big fan.
Yeah.
I think those are interesting. Consumer packaged goods. We have a global CPG client that's killing it. I mean, they're doing 6 months of revenue in 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Wow.
It's insane. But everyone's stocking up, so we just stacked strategies as governors closed states, and
But then they're going to have problems later, I think, because they're going to have fewer orders. They're going to have overstock.
it's a problem for tomorrow. You can make a year's worth of money in 4 months. It's not
I was wondering
not a
about
terrible
dating.
problem to have.
I was wondering about the dating industry, because
Yeah,
people
I've had
can't meet really,
No.
but they're bored at home. So are they using dating apps more?
Some people are. I've got a friend actually this morning. He was texting me his experiences of trying to date someone online that he's never met. So it's very much like old school online dating, 15, 20 years ago. And so people are still meeting using apps, but people are constructing dates in unusual ways. So creating online riddles for each other, or, finding ways to have virtual dates in video games like Animal Crossing or Minecraft, and still finding ways to hang out and have that element of connection. But I can imagine for apps, people are sat at home with sometimes not a whole lot else to do, right? Other than watch Netflix and swipe right. So it's, I imagine we're going to see some good earnings calls for Tinder and the like.
Yeah, it's going to be. No, but not only, but the funny thing is, though, and this is really kind of off topic, but dating world, it's like normally when people date, they go out and do stuff. They spend money. They like go out and, whatever. Now it's basically like, okay, you want to date? Well, like there's nothing to do. So it's like, so I wonder if any relationships start and then down the line they realize, oh, you're really cheap.
I don't know. I think it's more likely you're probably going to have like a nice explosion of divorces after this.
All those people stuck in lockdown together. Yeah, that's what happened in China, didn't it? When Wuhan and the surrounding area came out of lockdown, divorce applications went through the roof. So there we go.
Yeah, it's a fun societal experiment.
No, it is. I mean, this whole experience right now with COVID is like an experiment in a way. It's so surreal.
Yeah.
But it's. I just hope that lessons are learned, so in the end it'll be better. Maybe from now on, enough people will cover their mouths and more lives will be saved from future things. But I have another very good question. It was asking from stuff that was earlier. What is your recommendation for cosmetic surgery services? PPC strategy. PPC strategy for cosmetic services, which has been impacted by COVID-19.
Yeah,
that was an interesting question. I kind of feel that in a way, like if I was running campaigns for cosmetic surgery, I'd be like, now's the time to do it. You know what I mean? It's like if really, right? If you get something done, if let's say, people won't notice you recovering with a mask on.
Very true. Get your nose or chin done. Yeah.
Now's the time to get your nose and chin done.
Are you guys telling me something? It's now time. I should do it.
Come on.
I mean, I think it's the same thing across just about every elective surgery procedure, right? Like, I think you have to really understand your client and understand what capabilities they have, right? If you have the ability, like Arianne was saying, to pivot your business model to something where you can schedule future appointments or lock in patients at a discount to guarantee future revenue, then absolutely do that and focus your ads and be very clear and intentional that, hey, we are taking appointments, we are scheduling, we will be doing procedures on this date or subject to this guidance. But if you don't have that ability or you don't have that confidence to even offer consumers a product, I mean, at this point, I'd be a little leery to start throwing money into it, just because even though it will be a relatively affordable space, there's plenty of campaigns out there that are running on autopilot. Like I just saw one the other day from Wayfair where I type emoji and Wayfair shows up with ads because I guess they fired their whole their whole search ad team, and whoops, bad Wayfair.
Looking at it from the other side as well, you've got to think about consumers. Many of these procedures aren't cheap necessarily. They're a very considered purchase. And while people are going to be at home shopping and researching and probably spending a lot of time on social media, which, can sometimes fuel people's desire for procedures. Something we've seen in the UK is half of UK businesses, even before lockdown took effect and we were all shut at home, had seen significant declines in their takings. and their overall revenues. And so that's obviously going to decline further while we're in lockdown, because people are really unsure about what's happening with their finances and what support's going to be available from the government. And so people might be researching at the moment, but I imagine for something like cosmetic surgery, you're going to see a longer gap between that research and that booking, because people may want to hold on to that money in the short term. A huge number of people have said they're going to stay away from shops for some time or a long time when this is over. I think half of global consumers have said some or a long time. You're not going to want to go somewhere for a cosmetic surgery procedure if you're still worried about things like health and hygiene. And so I guess doing it in a way that can allay those concerns, or, as Sam was saying, maybe get someone to put something towards a procedure now that they can redeem at a time when they feel more comfortable. There's going to be ways around it, but there's going to be such distrust, I guess, around consumer spending at the moment that for me is the biggest challenge.
Yeah,
Well, I always felt. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Sam.
Oh no, I think it's a really good point. Is just because you open something back up doesn't mean people are going to spend money. It's not like the economy is not an on-off switch. I think I probably had a Twitter rant about this like the other day, because I was getting sick and tired of hearing like, we're going to open the economy back up and there's be a V-shaped recovery and it's going to be like it was yesterday. No, there's no evidence to support that at this point in time. So I think
I like to think of consumers as like two parts. Like I mean, I think you might agree with me, Sam, on this, but I think there's people out there who are price sensitive. And there's people who aren't. When I say that they aren't, if they see something that'll give them value, they'll spend. They don't care if it's $200 or $100. They'll spend if they feel like it gives them value. What I'm scared about Corona is not so much a short-term impact that we're feeling now. I'm scared that what worries me is that in the next year, even longer, because of the economic impact, there will be fewer people in the boat of the non-price sensitive and more people that are thinking about every penny, like you guys were just saying. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, there's in the US specifically, we're 33.5 million unemployed. That's roughly 20% of the workforce. I mean, that's a lot of your consumer discretionary income that's just poof. And
but I suspect that workforce is the one that spends less money in a way. In other words,
potentially,
you know what I mean? It's like they're not the ones buying as much because they're probably more.
But I mean, at the end of the day, 80% of U.S. households are living paycheck to paycheck, right? That's something we know. And yes, even though some of them might not be price sensitive or maybe price sensitive, at the end of the day, they're still buying some of these staples and they're probably still considering your service maybe an essential, maybe a staple. But if they don't have the money to even pay rent or mortgage, not only does that affect you directly, it also affects your landlord companies who are not in that price. Maybe a guy that owns 5 or 6 apartment buildings, he is a non-price sensitive consumer at this moment in time. But all of a sudden you start having one of those apartment buildings not paying rent every month. You go rent defaults from, for small landlords, it's 90% collection. Today, we're 65%, 66% rent collection. That's a material hit on a non-price sensitive consumer. That's a second order effect of all of your price sensitive consumers getting crushed. So I think you have to look a little bit broader. And
it's scary.
It is scary. I mean, and this is, there are going to be ripple effects, right? We got hit with the earthquake and maybe part of the tsunami. But after the earthquake and the tsunami subside, there's the fires that it caused, there's the down power lines, there's the absolute devastation of everything else underneath. And that's the part where I think a really good PPC manager can help their clients be like, hey, let's avoid this area because it's going to be a thing. Or, hey, we need to be really conscious because even though we're going to see some recovery here, there's a future, landmine coming up. We really should be pivoting our strategy to think about these things. Right. And I think there's some things you can do, but we're all going to be learning together, which is.
So actually, I have a question for someone who apparently must be really hit hard because they work in travel. David Vime, he says, we're a hotel consultancy company focused on independent hotels. Now, at the actual situation, hotels closed due to lockdown. What do you recommend for them? It's hard to say.
It's hard.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, travel's a really
no, I know.
I'm sorry.
I was reading a little bit about this earlier because depending on the kind of services your hotel offers, do you deal primarily?
Well, no, he's a consultant.
But the hotels they work with, often it'll be a particular kind of hotel. So do they cater to travelers? Do they cater to couples, families, business,
Of course.
functions? So that has huge implications. You know, the amount of people who've had weddings cancelled, or, you know, those of us in this industry, conferences and the like. So, you know, my advice to anyone in the industry at the moment is, like we were saying with cosmetic surgery, think about the ways you can use your contact list and the revenue you can potentially secure now for next year, and encouraging your clients that you work with to try and think ahead if they can. So when this is all over, while we may not be able to travel internationally until 2021, there'll be more people looking to travel at home. So get them to think about strategies for attracting more domestic travelers and thinking about how you get people to rebook events. They're bound to have cancelled
Or not even that, do things that you wouldn't normally do. Like for one thing, one thing I see, like I'm in Tel Aviv. I'm actually, I don't know if this was planned or not, but I'm noticing a lot more road construction. Almost as if they decided, okay, now is the time to do more infrastructure work. You know what I mean? So if I would say to hotels like, look, I mean, you know, if life gives you Corona, put a lemon in it. That's a bad joke I made a long time ago. But, you know, like I'm saying, like, look for the positive side. It's like, okay, so maybe think more long term. Think about how your hotel wants to look in 2 years. So that's my little tidbit with knowing nothing about the travel industry.
Yeah, I think it's. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no. I was going to say, I mean, I think the other thing on the hotel consultancy is maybe you might want to look at a non-traditional market like Arianne was saying, but maybe you look at people that are looking for a staycation, right? Instead of targeting people that are going to be traveling at all, because that might be scary, target people in your immediate surroundings and say, hey, you're sick of the house, you know, obviously allay the fears about COVID, or allay the fears about all of this, and maybe try to bring those people in. You have parents that have been cooped up with crazy children for 6 weeks now. There's no school, there's no relief, there's no grandparents. They probably want a staycation. So if you can do something, I mean, I would think a partnership with a local babysitting service, right? Here, we have, you know, COVID safe babysitters. They'll come to your house for a night. We're going to give you a room. We're going to give you dinner. It's going to be a date night. Whatever. Test them.
How do you know that?
I don't know. Test them. Although in the US, the testing thing's a little touchy, so maybe be careful. But I'm just thinking, if you can do something that creates an experience or makes this something that somebody can consume without having to go outside their comfort zone, that could be a huge win.
Yes. Exactly. And if you can't figure that out, by the way, David, something else, if your clients can't figure that out, like can't figure out a way to actually like make income and survive, like by attracting those local people, they have these hotels, this infrastructure, and if they could afford it, they can maybe do some good to the community. I mean, maybe, you know what I mean? In other words, if there's vacancy, do some good back, not necessarily for the sake of doing good. I mean, also because, you know, like it's publicity. It could help, you know, make people think higher of you and so on. We're almost out of time, by the way. The time flew in this one. It's very interesting. I have a question from Ravi Shankar Prasad. Ravi's asking, at this stage of worldwide lockdown, do we focus on search campaigns or on display campaigns? And also share your thought over Facebook ads, considering that clients have low budget. Okay,
that's broad. I can say things, and I'm not sure if they're going to be right or not, because it's really broad.
Depends, right?
Yes.
It's going to depend on the business. It's going to depend on how many customers you have. And I was asked this same question earlier, and my advice was, you've obviously got to keep the bottom of the funnel activity going, keep search going because it converts, make it as efficient as you can. But you also need to feed that activity or it's going to dry up over time. So I would probably cut out the middle section of the funnel, everything you might do for research and consideration, consider slimming that down, but keep your awareness activity going. Because if your brand is pivoting or if you're changing your offer or you want people to know you're open for business, having some level of display is going to be really, really important to maintaining visibility. But there's no one right answer. There are so many factors at play.
Right. But one thing I did notice, though, it's a bit of an opportunity. Like Facebook CPMs, I've never seen this low.
Yeah, they're low.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Search, I imagine less so, because if something is working in search, it's going to keep working in search, so the competition is going to stay.
Maybe, but I mean, there's a lot of companies that, you know, even with very high return on ad spend campaigns, very well-performing search campaigns, they're just pausing because they don't want to spend the money, which to me is mind-blowing, but this is what happens when people in marketing don't understand that, like, you have to be able to translate what you're doing into outcomes. And when you're doing that well, you have to keep doing it. I mean, I guess Facebook is Facebook's tricky, right? Because it depends on your attribution window, because I've seen some accounts where, you're looking at this 28-day click and all of a sudden you see conversion performance just crater, because not only do you lose the immediate conversions, the 1 days, but you're losing the people 28 days ago that would have purchased but for Corona or but for a job loss. They're gone too. So you see, cliffs on Facebook campaign performance. And in that case, it's really critical that you understand what's driving that and adjust. Like, you might see a short-term pickups. You don't want to switch your attribution window, but do that with caution and just try to focus on nearer term impacts and eliminate some of this tail noise that's happening as you come off the COVID curve.
Yeah. And I guess a word of caution on anyone who might be using bid strategies. I know Gianluca talked earlier about the challenge with them looking backwards and how we can't rely on the data right now. But if you're using any that rely on a CPA or a ROAS, by all means make changes and change those targets where you need them to be, but do it gradually. And remember that the campaigns are going to have that learning period. So you're going to see results fluctuate for a number of weeks. So again, avoid making changes that are too big too quickly. Ultimately, you've got to do what's right for your business, but that's just a note of caution. And again, another reason to maybe switch to manual bidding at a time like this.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, your bidding strategies are basically, to borrow a phrase from a good friend, Arianne Levy, it's a Roomba, right? It's not smart.
I know that
it's not
great.
Yeah. Aaron's brilliant, but it's a Roomba. And right now we have like a hurricane. So if you would send your Roomba to clean up a hurricane, I don't think you would. So don't do that. Like, give it structure, be there, manage it, really look at it carefully, and make sure that not only is, it aligned with what you're trying to do, but it has the right data to make those decisions, right? So this is a good time to look back at data pass back. This is a critical time to make sure that you're actually measuring incrementality. This is a time where maybe it's an opportunity for marketers to take a step back from their campaigns if they are paused and say, you know what, I don't even know if what I was doing before was working. Let me go get an evaluation. Let me go get an audit. Let me go do an audit. Let me do something that allows me to be smart moving forward. Because at the end of the day, you can't trust it. The data during here is be super noisy.
By the way, so that's to go back to Ravi's question when he was asking what should I focus on, display or search. Like display campaigns are more sensitive to big changes like this. There's a lot more data to deal with, right? So if you're dealing with search campaigns, especially search campaigns that are very well targeted, just a few exact phrase words or whatnot, I feel that there you have more flexibility in turbulent times to make adjustments. Algorithm learns things faster because there's less to learn, for example.
Yeah, I think that's right. For a lot of our clients, we've been, for search, there's a couple of cautions I put in. Like, the one is obviously, make sure you're checking your DSAs, your RSAs, and, especially on the DSA front, avoid the COVID terms, right? Unless you have a clear page, in which case, like for our healthcare clients, great. There's a COVID whole page of stuff, right? Great. We have a COVID campaign. We have COVID terms. If you're searching anything related to that, we're taking you right there so that you can get that information. But if you're searching for something else with a COVID added, you're excluded, right? That's managing both your negatives and your DSAs to avoid that kind of awkward thing where Google crawls in the COVID banner at the top of your website and it's populating it into search terms. That's not helpful.
Yeah. Impression shared. Make sure you're keeping an eye on that. Have a look for the campaigns that are working well. If they have any less than a 95% impression share, divert budget from elsewhere, because that will scale up, hopefully at a similar CPA, and that's more cash into your business. So let things like that be your guide rather than being afraid to just pause across the board.
Right.
And it's also important to pay attention to impression share and positions and whatnot to kind of gauge, are things changing because of the competitive landscape, or is it Corona?
Right.
Because if you see things changing there, then it's not just Corona, it could be something else.
Right. And you're going to have some long-term ripple effects on this, both for search and for display. But we're seeing a lot of audience shifts, like huge fluctuations in audience populations, like job seekers, for instance. 34 million people go unemployed. Job seekers is no longer meaningful. It is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Everybody's a news junkie, right? Everybody is getting coronavirus updates every day. News junkies doesn't mean anything.
So what this could be good. So what industries might have some positive from this? Maybe people in the employment industries, right?
Yeah.
Right. So maybe it's a good time to be in HR, to be in the business of hiring people.
And some people in retail, You know, I've seen a lot of the data that says Amazon have been pulling out a lot of the paid auctions. They're one of Google's biggest advertisers. If you work in retail, if you run shopping campaigns, and you can do so profitably right now also represents a really interesting opportunity for a big number of brands.
Yeah.
Right. You have a ton of opportunities, and especially if you have the other one that we're seeing some really cool things are like some of our commuter burbs, where all of a sudden, you know, you used to target maybe New York, but now it's actually the commuter burbs where you're seeing all kinds of really interesting action. And you can exclude New York now because no one's there. We can just focus on our audience in the commuter suburbs, which is a really interesting shift, because as people stop commuting, they get in or recently in, they're no longer recently in New York City. They are recently in somewhere in North Jersey.
Yeah.
But about also,
Good
Gianluca,
luck.
we're talking about getting out of the curve. I don't think that if you're targeting commuters, for example, I think a lot of people aren't. I mean, from my perspective, I live in Tel Aviv. There's tons of startups here. Even though like lockdown's ending, and by the way, we're very lucky in Israel in the aspect that we have something like 18 new cases yesterday, and before it was growing like crazy, like
Wow.
really dwindling down. I think that's sort of incredible in a way. But what what I'm noticing, but there's a lot of high tech here. There's a lot of startups. Like I don't see anybody working from the office anytime soon.
Correct.
At all, like in any of these big startups and so on. So in many ways, with I don't think that getting out of Corona is going to be as sharp as hard of an impact as drastic as getting into Corona. At least for
I
these
agree.
industries.
Yeah. Yeah, the V is fiction.
No.
But one thing you could do though, especially if you are like me and you're a bit of a cynic, and you think that there is going to be a second wave of this, and you think that this is going to be a bit of a longer process, make sure you're saving these audiences and these cohorts, both your high performers and your low performers now. And make sure you're capturing that data, because if and when, and again, I don't hope this for anybody, but if this does return, you're going to have a step up, because you're going to know these are my high performers during COVID last time. I can go back to them for immediate cash. I can go back to them and get sales. These are my low performers. I should get rid of them.
Super good point.
Save these audiences. Make sure you're being really careful, and prepare for the worst. We all want this to be over. We all hope everyone stays safe, but
yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're going super over here. I don't think it matters. Typically, we stop at well, it's 9:07 for me here. Yeah, but it's okay unless someone has something else to do. It's probably late for me and Gianluca. Arianne as well. She's down this side of the world.
It's
It's later for me.
Middle of the work day for me. So
for me, it's Friday, because in Israel, the last day of the work week is Thursday.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you. No, that's tomorrow. That's why it's Thursday.
Don't you say that on Thursday night?
No, that's Friday.
No, I know the Shabbat is.
Oh, we say because it's like happy weekend. That's because Shabbat
Exactly,
Shalom
that's
is like Shabbat, the seventh day of the week. And
I see you now, I don't see you tomorrow. So Shabbat Shalom.
Yes. And then we work on Sunday. And then people say, "How's that?" That's weird. Like, no, not really. It just feels like Monday. But then it's weird because I'm from Florida, so it's weird for me when I'm like, it's like my friends are out on Saturday night, and it's like I'm getting to work in the morning on Sunday, which is funny. Yes. Okay, so I guess we'll close. By the way, if there's any more comments, if anyone has any questions, just post on Twitter #SEMrushLive. And I think that yes, and by the way,
follow us all on Twitter, because that's where we talk.
Yeah, Twitter as well. Yes.
Yeah. Twitter is good.
Yes.
We
Twitter is good. Yes. So do follow Sam, Gianluca, Arianne, myself on Twitter. LinkedIn as well. You could hit me up there. Guys, if you want to give me your Twitter handles really quickly, I'll paste it in the YouTube chat. While you could give closing comments, if any of you want to give any closing tips, please feel free to do so.
Ooh, closing tips.
Oh, Gianluca, you can lead this one off.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have any closing tip. I think, get the point that we said earlier on monitoring CPC and conversion rate fluctuation. That to me is the least crazy thing that we can do now to make a little bit more sense of this mess that we're living. That's the positive spin. Yeah.
And take what you learn, and maybe let's apply it the next time there's a hurricane or something. This is what happens.
Plan for the worst.
Yes,
That's all
for the worst, exactly. And my question is, did anybody out there realize that my shirt is on inside out? I only figured it out looking at myself in the camera like about 15 minutes ago.
All right.
No, really.
I can't say
This is
I know
what Corona. And this is what
I-
this is what Corona does because I don't go out.
I thought it looked weird, but I was like, it's probably fine. It's just Joel.
No, it's good style, right?
Yeah. I
Okay, let's
guess.
spin up. Yes. Yes.
Oh
and we
no,
have
we were
a-
doing final tips, right? I thought I had to come up with
No.
one of these. I spent like less 30 seconds coming up with one.
Go on then.
No, I mean, I think my 2 would be number 1, keep your audiences. Number 2, really take this time, no matter what you're doing with your marketing, to take an unbiased look at it, because this is when everything breaks. So when everything breaks is a good time as any to put it all back together again. So get an audit, get an evaluation, do it yourself. There are lots of great guides out there. There are a lot of agencies that are doing it. But
Like now's the time to rebuild the roads.
exactly. Everybody else is working on infrastructure, work on yours. And
Exactly. I have one quick question. Do any of you guys have you ever worked at Traffic Junkie? Okay. Because no, someone just asked if it's a good time to advertise on Traffic Junkie, because I think that's it's an ad network that advertises on porn sites.
Yeah, I read a case study that was quite interesting. A company that was delivering food late at night. Apparently, 99% of advertising that is go through this network is porn. So they display porn ads on porn sites. So it's a little bit
They
cyclical.
sell food on porn sites.
I mean,
Sorry.
I don't know, but this sounds awesome. This sounds like interesting.
No, I mean,
no,
people
but
like-
anyways, they were promoting burgers delivery at 2 at night, and it really stand out, right? Because porn and burgers. Like, what is this? So they got amazing CDR and amazing response rate. They also engage
Now here's a bun that's really tasty.
You should have been a copywriter.
Oh wow!
Like, pivot your career tomorrow morning. This is
That's my change. Like personally, in the past year, I've been doing more and more copywriting.
It makes sense.
That's
the
clever.
Corona and lemon thing that you said earlier, it works on 3 levels. It's like, anyways, and they also did this strategy of reaching out to porn actresses. Erotic actresses on different networks, Twitter namely, where basically they were displaying T-shirts with the brand name. So in other words, it's a very cheap network from what I heard on this case study. And if you are advertising products that are sort of, not related to that inventory, or some of, cross-selling to that inventory, if you will, could be presenting an interesting opportunity.
I've never gotten into the network though. I thought about it before. It's been suggested to me, but it's, I'm more into the mainstream. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm against exploitation of people, though. It makes me feel bad now. This day and age, it's not like 20, 30 years ago where you could laugh at it. Now it's sad. The world's come to.
Now that we're all set.
Okay.
Thanks, Joel.
Yes. So if you guys want to continue the conversation, we could do it on Twitter. And I really enjoy this. Thank you, Gianluca, Arianne, and Sam.
Yep.
I look forward to meeting with you guys again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
See ya.
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.